My name is Rachel Bennett. I am 36 years old, and until last Thanksgiving, I believed that being the dependable daughter was something to be proud of. Then my father raised his glass, smiled at everyone around the table, and calmly announced that the family business would belong to my younger brother. Because according to him, I had already received my share by spending my whole life living under his roof. The room filled with applause before I even understood what he had said. I was still holding the pie I had baked that morning. My hand smelled of cinnamon and butter, while everyone congratulated my brother Nathan for becoming the future owner of Bennett Hardware, the store where I had worked for 17 years. Nobody looked at me, not my mother, who had asked me to arrive before sunrise to prepare dinner, not my aunt, who always introduced me as the daughter who never complained, not even Nathan, whose eyes stayed fixed on the deed my father slid across the table. I stood there smiling, because I had learned long ago that smiling made uncomfortable moments disappear faster. Only they did not know something. Inside my handbag was another folder, a folder that could destroy everything they believed they owned. 3 days earlier, a lawyer had placed it in front of me with trembling hands and asked one simple question. Did your father ever tell you about the original partnership agreement? I answered no, because I truly had never heard those words before. The lawyer looked at me for several seconds before turning the document toward me. The first signature belonged to my grandfather. The second belonged to someone whose name I had not heard spoken in almost 20 years. Mine. Not because I had signed it, because my grandfather had. He had left something for me that nobody in my family had ever mentioned. At that Thanksgiving table, my father kept talking about loyalty and sacrifice while my brother thanked everyone for believing in him. My mother wiped away tears of happiness. The deed continued moving from hand to hand. Nobody noticed that I was no longer listening. I was staring at the old folder inside my bag and remembering the last words my grandfather whispered to me before he died. Never let anyone convince you that gratitude means surrender. I finally understood what he had been trying to protect. I also understood why my family had spent 17 years making sure I never asked a single question. And when my father looked at me, expecting another quiet smile of acceptance, I slowly placed my handbag on the table. Then I pulled out the folder. The entire room fell silent before I said a single word. I did not open the folder. Not yet. Some truths become heavier the moment everyone else sees them. My father looked at the worn leather cover and frowned, as though he recognized it before realizing where he had seen it. Rachel, what is that? His voice remained calm, but I noticed the tiny pause before my name. My father never hesitated unless something frightened him. I smiled. I was wondering the same thing until 3 days ago. Nathan laughed awkwardly. Can this wait until after dinner? Normally I would have agreed. I had spent most of my adult life making difficult conversations more convenient for everyone except myself. But something inside me had already changed. No, it waited 17 years already. Nobody reached for another bite of dessert. The silence around the table reminded me of every family dinner where I had listened instead of speaking. My mother folded her napkin carefully. Rachel, don't make a scene. That sentence had followed me since childhood. When Nathan broke a window playing baseball, I was told not to make a scene. When I postponed nursing school because Dad needed another pair of hands in the store, I was told not to make a scene. When Grandpa died and I returned to work 2 days later because the business couldn't stop, I heard the same words again. Don't make a scene. I looked at my mother. Have you ever noticed that the person making the sacrifice is always the one accused of making the scene? She lowered her eyes. No answer. There never was one. Nathan cleared his throat. Rachel, nobody forced you to stay. I looked at him for several seconds. He believed that. Maybe he truly did. That was the saddest part. You remember your scholarship to Colorado? He nodded. Of course. Dad said we couldn't both leave town. Exactly. I turned toward everyone else. Nathan left because someone stayed. The store opened every morning because someone unlocked the doors before sunrise. Every inventory count was finished because someone missed birthdays and weekends. Every Christmas rush ended because someone worked 14-hour days without overtime. I never realized until this moment that none of you remembered who that someone was. Nobody interrupted me. My aunt stared into her coffee. My cousin suddenly found the tablecloth fascinating. My father leaned back in his chair. You were paid. I almost laughed. Was I? The lawyer had spent 2 hours showing me payroll records. For 17 years, my salary had never once matched the position I actually held. Officially, I was still listed as an assistant manager. Despite running purchasing, bookkeeping, supplier contracts, payroll, customer accounts, hiring seasonal workers, and negotiating commercial deliveries. On paper, Nathan's salary had surpassed mine 3 years after he joined the company. In reality, he spent most afternoons golfing with contractors while I balanced every account before closing. I reached into the folder and removed a photocopy. This is my employment file. I slid it toward Nathan. Read my job title. He frowned. Assistant manager. Now read yours. Store director. He swallowed. Dad. My father answered before Nathan could continue. Titles don't matter. The words landed heavily in the room. I nodded slowly. That's interesting, because 20 minutes ago, titles mattered enough for you to transfer ownership. His jaw tightened. For the first time all evening, he stopped looking like the confident head of the family. He looked like a businessman calculating risk. That expression brought back a memory I had buried years earlier, the week after Grandpa's funeral. I had been 19. Everyone was exhausted. Dad handed me a ring of keys. Just until things settled down, I believed him. 1 month became 6. 6 became 3 years. 3 became 17. Every time I mentioned going back to school, there was another reason to wait. The recession, the expansion, Mom's surgery, Nathan's wedding, the new warehouse. There was always one more emergency. Always one more reason my future could wait a little longer. Grandpa had once noticed me locking the store after closing. He placed his hand on my shoulder. You're carrying more than they realize. I smiled and said, families help each other. He looked strangely disappointed. Families also remember who is doing the helping. I did not understand what he meant then. Now I did. The lawyer had explained everything. 6 months before Grandpa died, he had rewritten the original partnership agreement, not because he planned to punish anyone, because he feared exactly what was happening tonight. He had watched me become invisible inside my own life, and he had left behind one final protection. The document inside my folder was not sentimental. It was legal, properly witnessed, properly filed, properly forgotten, until someone accidentally discovered it during a property records audit. My father looked directly at the folder. Where did you get that? I met his eyes. From a lawyer who seemed very surprised that I had never been told I was already a legal partner in Bennett Hardware. Nathan's face lost all color. My mother stopped breathing for a second. My father did something I had never seen him do before. He whispered, "That's impossible." I finally opened the folder. The first page appeared between my fingers. Then I quietly turned it around so everyone at the table could read Grandpa's signature. Nobody spoke. Even the children at the far end of the table sensed something had shifted. My father reached toward the document. I placed my hand on it first. "Please don't." His hand stopped halfway. For the first time in my life, he actually waited for my permission. It was a strange feeling, not satisfying, just unfamiliar. Nathan leaned forward and read the first paragraph aloud under his breath. Original Partnership Amendment. His voice cracked before he reached the next line. 25% ownership interest shall be transferred to Rachel Bennett upon completion of her 18th birthday, provided she continues active employment within the company. He stopped reading. Nobody breathed. My mother slowly turned toward my father. "Frank." He never answered. Instead, he stared at Grandpa's signature as though it belonged to a stranger. I remembered the day Grandpa made me stay after closing. I had just turned 18. He asked me to lock the front door. Then he placed a fresh set of keys into my hand. "These are yours now." I laughed. Dad already gave me keys. Grandpa smiled. "Not those. These." He held my hand closed around them. "One day you'll understand the difference between opening a door and owning the building behind it." I thought he was talking about responsibility. I realized now he had been speaking literally. The lawyer explained that Grandpa believed the store should belong to the people who actually kept it alive. Nathan was expected to inherit part of it. So was I. Everything had been documented months before Grandpa passed away. There was only one condition. Neither partner could sell or transfer the business without informing the other owner. I looked at my father. "Did you forget that part?" His face hardened. "Your grandfather wasn't thinking clearly near the end." The sentence hit me harder than I expected. Not because it was cruel, because it was false. Grandpa balanced inventory by memory until 2 weeks before he died. He still corrected supplier invoices without using a calculator. He remembered birthdays better than anyone else in the family. No, he knew exactly what he was doing. The lawyer had shown me medical evaluations attached to the estate records. Grandpa had insisted they be included. Competent, of sound mind, signed by 2 physicians. He had anticipated this argument years before anyone made it. Nathan looked from Dad to me. "You knew about this?" Dad stayed silent. Nathan asked again, "Dad, did you know?" The room became painfully quiet. Finally, my father nodded. "Yes," Nathan blinked. "Since when?" "Since your grandfather signed it." My brother slowly pushed back his chair. His expression no longer carried excitement, only confusion. "You told me the business was always supposed to be mine." Dad rubbed his forehead. "It became complicated." Nathan laughed once. It wasn't a happy laugh. "No, you made it complicated." I watched my younger brother carefully. For years I had blamed him for everything. The promotions, the praise, the future that somehow always belonged to him. But sitting across from me was a man who looked just as deceived as I had been. Different lies, same liar. My mother whispered, "Frank, why didn't you tell them?" He answered without looking at anyone, "Because Rachel would never have stayed if she'd known." The words settled over the table like dust after a collapse. Nobody moved. Nobody defended him. Because it was true. If I had known I already owned part of the company, I would have demanded equal authority, equal salary, equal respect, or I would have walked away years earlier. Instead, I stayed because I believed I owed the family everything. My father had never needed chains. Ignorance had been enough. I suddenly remembered dozens of conversations that had never made sense before. Every time I asked to attend management conferences, "Not this year." Every time I wanted accounting certification. Maybe later. Every time suppliers insisted on speaking with the owner, Dad would appear from his office just before contracts were signed. I thought he didn't trust my experience. Now I understood. He couldn't allow anyone outside the family business to discover who actually had legal ownership. One loose conversation, one bank loan, one audit. Everything would have unraveled. The lawyer called it concealment. I called it stealing 17 years. Nathan pushed the deed my father had handed him back across the table. I can't sign this. Dad's eyes widened. Nathan, no. His voice was calm but firm. If Rachel owns part of this company, then I won't pretend she doesn't exist. My father stood so suddenly his chair fell backward. This family stays together because I made difficult decisions. I looked directly at him. No, this family stayed together because I kept paying the price for your decisions. He opened his mouth to answer. Before he could speak, the front doorbell rang. Everyone looked toward the hallway. Nobody had expected another guest. My mother frowned. Who could that be tonight? I already knew. The lawyer had promised me he would only come if absolutely necessary. I quietly stood from the table. He's here because I asked him to witness what happens next. Then I walked toward the front door while every member of my family watched in stunned silence. I opened the front door before anyone else could reach it. Mr. Howard Ellis stood on the porch with a leather briefcase tucked beneath his arm. He had retired from practicing law 2 years earlier, yet he still carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who trusted documents more than promises. Snow had begun falling. He brushed a few flakes from his coat and looked at me. Are you sure you want to do this tonight? I glanced back toward the dining room. 17 years ago would have been better. Tonight will have to do. He nodded once and stepped inside. My father appeared in the hallway immediately. Howard. The greeting sounded less like recognition and more like a warning. The lawyer answered politely. Frank. It's been a long time. Not long enough, apparently. Mr. Ellis ignored the remark. He had the strange ability to remove emotion from a room simply by refusing to participate in it. Everyone gathered in the dining room again, but nothing looked the same anymore. The turkey had gone cold. Coffee sat untouched. The celebration had disappeared, as though it had never existed. Mr. Ellis placed his briefcase on the table and carefully removed several folders. Original partnership agreement, estate correspondence, corporate filings, annual shareholder notices. Each document landed with a soft sound that somehow felt louder than shouting. Nathan stared at the growing stack. There are this many records? Mr. Ellis looked at him. Many more. Your grandfather believed important decisions should always leave a paper trail. He slid one envelope toward my father. This one was addressed to you personally. Dad's face lost its color. I remember that envelope. Mr. Ellis nodded. I assumed you did. You signed for it. My father didn't touch it. The lawyer opened the envelope himself and removed a single sheet. It was dated 19 years earlier. Dear Frank, if you are reading this, then I am no longer here to explain my decision in person. Rachel has earned ownership, not because she is my granddaughter, but because she has already shown more commitment to this business than anyone her age should ever have to. If one day she chooses another life, then support her. Do not make the mistake of confusing loyalty with obligation. The store can survive without her. I pray that she never believes your love cannot. Nobody moved. The only sound came from the old grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. My mother quietly covered her mouth. She had tears in her eyes. Not dramatic tears, the kind that appear when someone suddenly realizes an uncomfortable memory has been true all along. She whispered. He knew. Mr. Ellis answered gently. He knew exactly what worried him. Nathan looked toward Dad again. Why didn't you honor this? Dad remained silent. The lawyer continued. Because there was another letter. He removed a second envelope. This one had never been opened. The seal remained intact. Rachel, your grandfather left this for you, only if I believed you had never been informed about your ownership. My hands began shaking. I looked at the handwriting. I had seen it thousands of times on birthday cards and little notes left beside the cash register. Mr. Ellis handed me the envelope. It felt impossibly light, as though 17 years could somehow weigh almost nothing. I opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter folded twice. The first sentence blurred before my eyes. My dear Rachel, if this letter reaches you, then someone has hidden the truth from you. I had to stop reading. The room disappeared around me. Grandpa had expected this. Not hoped, expected. I took a slow breath and continued aloud. I know you. You will blame yourself first. Please don't. If anyone convinces you that love must always be paid for with your own future, then remember something I learned too late. People who truly love you celebrate your freedom even when it takes you away from them. My voice trembled. Nobody interrupted. I kept reading. There is one final document with Mr. Ellis. I instructed him never to reveal it unless my wishes regarding the partnership were ignored. If that day comes, then the business deserves honesty more than blood. The final page is not revenge. It is protection. Every eye turned toward the lawyer. Even my father looked frightened now. Mr. Ellis slowly opened the last folder. This document had never been filed because your grandfather hoped it would never become necessary. Rachel, he looked directly at me. Once I place this on the table, there will be no going back. I nodded. I'm done going backward. He slid the document toward the center of the table. My father stood so abruptly that his chair crashed onto the hardwood floor. No, Howard, don't. But the lawyer had already turned the first page around. Across the top, in bold letters, were the words that changed everything. Petition for removal of managing partner due to breach of fiduciary duty. My father stared at the title as though refusing to read the words would somehow erase them. His face had become almost unrecognizable. For as long as I could remember, he had always looked certain of every decision, certain of every answer, certain that everyone around him would eventually agree. That certainty disappeared in a matter of seconds. Howard folded his hands. Frank, your father instructed me to prepare this document as insurance. He hoped I would destroy it before anyone ever saw it. My father laughed once. It sounded hollow. Insurance against his own son? No. Howard's voice remained calm. Insurance against anyone who placed personal control above the company's legal obligations. Nathan slowly sat down again. What exactly is fiduciary duty? The lawyer looked at him. If someone manages property that belongs to other people, the law requires honesty, transparency, and equal treatment. He turned another page, concealing a shareholder's ownership, withholding financial information, blocking access to company records, paying unequal compensation while benefiting personally. Those are serious violations. Every sentence felt heavier than the last. I looked at Dad. Were you really paying yourself bonuses while telling me the business couldn't afford raises? He didn't answer. Howard quietly opened another folder. Actually, he already answered years ago. He slid several financial statements across the table. My salary, Dad's salary, Nathan's salary, annual bonuses, profit distributions, everything. Numbers never shout. They don't need to. Nathan stared at the pages. Dad, you made almost 4 times what Rachel did. Dad finally spoke. I built this company. The sentence escaped him almost automatically, like a reflex. Howard shook his head. No. Your father built it. Rachel preserved it. You managed it. Those are not the same thing. Silence returned. I studied the financial reports. Every Christmas, Dad had explained why we couldn't replace outdated equipment. Every summer, he postponed renovations because business was supposedly difficult. Every time I requested software upgrades or additional staff, he reminded me we needed to save money. Yet the statements showed luxury vehicle purchases, country club memberships, executive bonuses, consulting fees paid to companies owned entirely by my father. I suddenly understood why every budget meeting had ended so quickly. I had never been allowed to see the real numbers, only the ones prepared for me. I looked at Howard. When did you discover all this? Years ago. Then why didn't you tell me? Because legally, I couldn't. Your grandfather instructed me to protect your interests without violating attorney-client privilege. I could only act if someone challenged the estate, or if evidence appeared that his instructions had been ignored. 3 months ago, the company applied for a commercial refinancing loan. The bank requested updated ownership verification. That's when everything surfaced. I remembered that refinancing. Dad told me the paperwork was routine. It wasn't. It had almost exposed everything. Nathan rubbed both hands across his face. How much did Rachel actually lose? Howard answered immediately. I calculated only measurable losses. 17 years of unpaid ownership distributions, salary discrepancies, profit participation, and estimated value adjusted for inflation. He named the number $1,843,000. Nobody reacted immediately. The amount was too large, too impossible. My mother whispered it again as though hearing it twice might change it. 1.8 million. I wasn't thinking about the money. I was thinking about time. 17 birthdays spent stocking shelves, vacations canceled, relationships that faded because I was always working, dreams postponed until I forgot they had once been mine. There wasn't a spreadsheet in the world that could calculate those. Dad looked directly at me. Rachel, if this becomes public, the business will collapse. I met his eyes. No, the lies will. There is a difference. For the first time that evening, I saw genuine fear. Not fear of prison, not fear of losing money, fear of losing the image he had spent decades creating. Nathan slowly closed the financial report. You used both of us. Dad looked confused. I was supposed to inherit something that wasn't yours to give. Rachel was supposed to sacrifice everything without knowing why. Neither of us mattered. Only control did. Those words hurt my father more than anything I had said, because they came from the son he believed would always defend him. My mother suddenly stood. Everyone looked at her. She turned toward my father. I need you to answer one question. Just one. He nodded slowly. Did you ever intend to tell Rachel the truth? He hesitated, only for a second. But sometimes 1 second is longer than an entire lifetime. My mother closed her eyes. She already had her answer. Howard carefully gathered several documents into one stack. Rachel, legally the decision belongs entirely to you now. You can file this petition Monday morning. You can negotiate privately. Or you can walk away. No one in this room can choose for you anymore. I looked around the table. The same dining room, the same family photographs, the same polished wood where I had wrapped birthday presents, helped children with homework, and planned holiday dinners. Everything looked familiar. Nothing felt the same. I slowly closed Grandpa's letter and slipped it back into its envelope. Then I looked at my father. For the first time in 17 years, I wasn't asking what the family needed from me. I was asking myself a different question. What kind of life did I want after I finally stopped surviving someone else's? Monday morning arrived with the kind of gray sky that makes every building look older than it really is. I barely slept. Grandpa's letter lay on my kitchen table beside a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours earlier. I read the final paragraph at least 20 times before I folded it one last time and placed it inside my purse. There was only one sentence I couldn't stop thinking about. People reveal their character when they finally realize they cannot control the outcome. At 9 o'clock, I walked into Howard's office. He already had 2 folders waiting. One was marked Settlement, the other Litigation. He motioned toward the chair across from him. Have you decided? I nodded. I have, but before I tell you, I need to know something. If I file the petition, what happens first? Howard leaned back. The court appoints an independent forensic accountant. Every financial record for the past 20 years becomes subject to review. Every transfer, every bonus, every company expense, every tax filing. Nothing remains private. I looked out the window. And Dad? He could lose management authority immediately while the investigation is pending. I was quiet for several seconds. Howard finally asked, "What are you thinking?" The truth surprised even me. I'm thinking that I've spent 17 years cleaning up other people's messes. I don't want my first free decision to be driven by anger. He smiled faintly. Your grandfather said you would answer exactly like that. I laughed softly. He knew me too well. Howard slid the settlement folder closer. Then start here. You can always go to court later. You can't always come back from court. 2 hours later, my father arrived. He looked 10 years older than he had 4 days earlier. The confidence was gone. Even the expensive suit seemed too large for him. Nathan came with him. So did my mother. No one spoke during the first minute. Howard finally broke the silence. Rachel has prepared her terms. Dad looked at me. Terms. Not demands, not revenge, just terms. I opened the folder. My voice remained steady. First, the company formally recognizes my ownership exactly as Grandpa intended. Second, an independent accounting firm reviews every financial record from the day Grandpa died. Third, any money legally owed to me is repaid according to the accountant's findings. Fourth, you retire as managing partner within 90 days. Nathan looked surprised. Retire? I nodded. You can still own your share. You just don't get to control everyone else's future anymore. Dad remained silent. I continued. Fifth, the company creates written governance rules. No family member will ever again work there without a formal contract. No hidden salaries. No private decisions. Everything documented. Howard smiled almost imperceptibly. Exactly what your grandfather wanted, Dad finally spoke. And if I refuse? Howard answered before I could. Then we file the petition this afternoon. Another long silence followed. My father stared at the settlement agreement without touching it. Finally, he looked directly at me. Was there ever anything I could have said that would make you forgive me? I thought about the question carefully. Years ago, there had been. Not anymore. Because forgiveness wasn't the problem. Trust was. I spoke quietly. If you had told me the truth the day Grandpa died, I probably would have stayed anyway. That's what hurts the most. You lied to keep someone who never planned to leave. He lowered his head. For the first time in my life, I saw shame instead of pride. Real shame, not embarrassment, not self-pity. just the painful realization that he had destroyed something that could never be rebuilt. Nathan reached for the agreement. "I'll sign." Dad looked at him. "You don't have authority." Nathan shook his head. "No, but I have a choice. I'm done pretending everything is normal." He stood and walked around the table until he stopped beside me. Then he did something neither of us expected. He hugged me. Not the quick, polite hug we exchanged every Christmas. A real one. "I'm sorry. I should have noticed." I closed my eyes. "You couldn't notice what someone worked so hard to hide." He stepped back. "Still, I'm sorry." Our mother began crying quietly. She looked at me. "I failed you too. I should have asked more questions." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You believed him. So did I." The only person who hadn't spoken was Dad. He looked at every page, then at Grandpa's framed photograph hanging in Howard's office. Finally, he picked up the pen. The signature took less than 10 seconds. Undoing 17 years of deception required exactly 11 letters. Frank Bennett. When he finished, he pushed the papers toward Howard. "I don't expect anyone to thank me." Howard collected the documents. No one was planning to. 6 months later, Bennett Hardware looked completely different. Not because the building changed, but because the people inside did. The accounting review confirmed almost every dollar Howard had estimated. Repayment was arranged over time without forcing the company into bankruptcy. Nathan became operations director after interviewing with the same board as every other candidate. He earned the position instead of inheriting it. I became chair of the company, but hired an experienced general manager from outside the family. For the first time in its history, the business belonged to professionals instead of assumptions. As for me, I finally enrolled in the business program I had postponed nearly 2 decades earlier. Walking into a classroom at 36 felt terrifying. It also felt wonderfully late. Dad retired quietly. Once every few months, he sends me a handwritten note, not asking for anything, not giving advice, just telling me about the tomatoes in his garden or a book he finished reading. Sometimes healing begins with silence instead of explanations. Sometimes it doesn't happen at all. Either way, life continues. Grandpa's old store keys still hang beside my front door. I no longer carry them because someone expects me to. I carry them because they remind me of something I learned far too late. Responsibility should never require the disappearance of the person carrying it. The business survived. The family changed. And I finally discovered that protecting your own future is not an act of selfishness. It's the first honest promise you make to yourself. Thank you so much for watching. Drop a comment below, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.